news. Tickets for the Conference on Religious Trauma, Court 2023, are now available. Also, if you're interested in an ad-free version of the Divorcing Religion podcast, come join me over on Patreon. Links for both are in the show notes. Thanks. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Divorcing Religion podcast. I'm your host, Janice Selby. I'm a registered professional counselor and a religious recovery consultant. My guest today joins us from the United Kingdom. Zorah Khan understands both cultural oppression and religious indoctrination, having grown up in an Islamic cult from childhood. In addition to being deeply fear-based, the cult also endorsed the suppression of joy, freedom, and segregation from wider society. Accordingly, she was removed from school to further her indoctrination and train her to spread the cult teachings as truth. With both her voice and her sexuality repressed, Zorah was married off at a young age. In her own words, she says, "My opinions and freedom were always in the hands of someone else. This conditioning ran so deep that I couldn't even gain an understanding of the situation until I escaped and had space." Life looks very different for Zorah these days. Viewing herself as an intuitive healer, her passion now is to hold space for people moving through personal transformation. I'm grateful that Zorah has agreed to share some of her experiences with us today on the Divorcing Religion podcast. Welcome, Zorah. It's so nice to have you.
Hello. Wow. It's definitely insightful to listen to that. Hey.
It is really interesting when we hear ourselves described by another person.
Yeah, like I had so many different emotions there. I was like, what a party pooper. Like the whole, like all of that, what you can't do. It's like, there's just no fun. And then, as I started to listen, I thought, wow, that's deep. And you forget. I forget.
Yes. And you and I were chatting just before we started recording about my lovely nails that I have all done up for the holiday season. And we were both just recollecting how doing something that simple as painting our nails or using makeup or anything like that was not permitted when we were in the very restrained and confining oppressive groups that we were part of.
God, yeah, I know, right? The difference now with the children, like they wouldn't have a clue. But yeah, it's true. It's like, I feel like whose business is it of what you wear now? I mean, the freedom when you come in, it's like, whose business is it? I mean, in the Islamic culture, you can't take facial hair off, which isn't really great for somebody like me who grows hair really quickly. So, I wasn't looking too hot, let's say. But yeah, I mean, just small little things like that. It's so true to just have that freedom and choice and, to look pretty.
Yes, exactly. I feel like it might have been different thousands of years ago when there was no social media, no photographs, nothing like that. But when we are bombarded constantly by images and pictures of how other people are, it can definitely make it harder for us to just kind of stay in that shell that religion wants us to be inside. I wonder if you would tell us what it was like for you growing up in the group that you were in, which you recognize and identify as a cult. We'd love to hear what that was like for you and how it started.
I mean, it's interesting that more things have come to me now that we're speaking about looking glamorous and visible and anything that kind of stirs any attention. It feels like you hit the nail on the head. It feels that the kind of community that I was in, which was, I was kind of restricted to only being with this cult. It was prohibited to make friends with anybody that was outside of this. So that even means Muslims, even though it was an Islamic cult, wouldn't call it that at the time. It felt like being here was also, you couldn't be visible in any way. You couldn't really have a voice either. And you know, I'm going to go into the story of it, but it's just so interesting because you brought the nails and all of this stuff has just come flooding back. Like, you know, we had people monitoring to see if you looked in any way attractive. And then it was like the school, it was like a policing, because I wore the hijab. And if you had like one strand of hair coming out, you would get stopped, humiliated, and told what that strand of hair is equivalent to. So one strand of hair is like being naked in the face of God. Deep, that's very deep.
Wow.
So imagine being shamed while you're dressed from head to toe, and there's a policing system. And interestingly enough, I found that the women were like, do you find this, that the women are like, not got your back? They're kind of like looking out to get you as well. There was no sense of loyalty in any way. It was really kind of segregated and competition with arrogance and righteousness of, because they're going to heaven. But it's just, you know, I mean, I would have started this story so differently, but you've just reminded me of like a massive chunk, like, you know, making sure that to wear like really light, you know, just basically not stirring any attention whatsoever, to stay quiet, to stay timid, and you know, really like compared to the person I am now, I mean, you can't repress that stuff. Even if anybody tried to.
And it's what sounds like it was such a difference then for boys growing up in the cult versus girls growing up in the cult. And the girls were completely responsible for any thoughts that the boys might have.
Yes. I mean, do you not find that this is in religion generally? I mean, I do find that boys get a bit easier ride.
Yeah. When we're talking about Abrahamic cults. Yeah, Abrahamic religions for sure.
Yeah. I mean, yes, definitely. My brother would have a very different experience because, you know, visibly, you look different. I mean, there were so many more restrictions because the woman is covered from head to toe. She cannot mix with anybody, any of the opposite sex. If you wanted to travel anywhere, you have to take somebody that you trust. A man there's a lot of restrictions for a woman in Islam to go to travel, to go anywhere.
And this was in the United Kingdom. I just want our listeners to know this wasn't in Saudi Arabia or any place like that. This was in the United Kingdom.
Yeah, let me start from the beginning. So in a nutshell, I'm from Afghanistan. And ironically, you know, I'll start when we my father wanted us to have more of a traditional upbringing, and when I was young, my mum and I and my younger brother, we fled, we left when we were young because it was not what we wanted and it was quite dominating. So we kind of did a liberation already. So part of my growing up was being liberated from the culture of Afghanistan. And it kind of creeped in a really sneaky way into our family anyway, and in more of an extreme way. So I use ironic, it's that we kind of didn't outrun it. And in the East End of London, there was a revolution happening at the time in the community of East London. And there were a lot of activists speaking out against the Middle East. So that's the plug. It's kind of getting people to connect with oppression and give them a voice and an identity and a community. And my mum is quite a passionate person. So it definitely rung a bell for her because she's all about, you know, speaking out against the unjust. And, you know, it started off being very political. And I remember even when I had joined the group as a young girl, I didn't know that, I'd have to wear the scarf. It was just political. So you kind of go in with the right attitude because you're thinking, yeah, I want to be part of this change and racism and violence and, all this stuff that's happening that we don't know about. And then you kind of get sucked in and all of a sudden you're there because they are enrolling you. And then, I said yes to it all of a sudden I've put a scarf on and I've looked around and realized, oh, I have to wear this. So, it was done in such a subtle way as what happens.
And you were a child?
Yes, I was 10.
Mm-hmm.
And realized that, we were also quite monitored as well. So whoever had done enrolling, then you were assigned people to kind of watch. That's really, really, like thinking about it now, God, yeah, it was really calculated. But you think, wow, like we're getting all this love. And, that we weren't really connected to my mum's side of the family because we already, dishonored them by my mum leaving Afghanistan, etc. So it brought community, it brought love, and brought us together, and there was some kind of structure. And I was definitely for that because I really, really craved that a belonging and
for sure,
and maybe some rules.
Yes, and 10 is an important age because you're not the little child that you were. You're starting to think bigger and have a greater understanding of things. And for a lot of us, we're sort of starting to enter puberty sometimes when we're 10 and a little bit older. And so how we're viewing ourselves is also changing as we start to identify some more with our gender roles that have been prescribed for us. So it's a vulnerable time to be that age. And so your mom, who was or is a fairly passionate person, was drawn in this direction. And so, of course, being her daughter, you're going in that direction as well. And then you get in there and you're looking around, you're going, well, let's see where it goes. So you find yourself covering now.
I felt like we needed some form of structure because, my mum recovering from the first, trauma. Yeah. I think that it brought some form of, it definitely was something that I gravitated towards more than being passionate. It was like, I needed this. I needed my mum to be at home.
Oh, wow.
I really needed it. And it brought us to praying and it brought intentions to eating. And, there's this form of like devotion that gets triggered. And it's like, I have that and I wanted that. It felt pure. It felt safe.
And it can feel important as well. Then when all of a sudden we're identifying with, this is my identity. I am, because I'm this, I must cover my head and I must say these prayers. And this is part of, now you're, like you said, fitting in with that community.
Yeah. So it was like a slow, and at the time they were like breaking off from another organization. So then it was even more like, controversial, and Louis Theroux at the time was filming. So, we felt special and I was the youngest recruit. So I really got thrown in like, wow. I have a cause now, have a great cause. I'm dedicating myself to this. Wow. And
was this a documentary?
Yeah, it's. I think you can find like 20 minutes of it on YouTube.
Okay, Louis Theroux.
Yeah.
And is an Islamic cult. Okay. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so it's called Tottenham Ayatollah.
Can you say that one more time, please?
So it's called Tottenham Ayatollah, which is the clergy who lived in Tottenham in a space in East London.
Very good. Okay. Yeah. All right. So then you have this added elements of importance there because you were featured as the youngest devotee.
Yeah, we were going to go on screen and the world was going to hear the truth. And I mean, if I watch it now, I mean, Yeah. So it was fun as well. It was made so many friends from all over the world that was part of this cult that were either converts. The community had grown, and then that just became, my whole world. I was at school briefly, but purely to enroll or to speak out. So when I was in class, I'd get up and I'd start questioning the teacher.
Wow.
Yeah, I had a lot of
That's a
confidence.
lot.
Every Friday I would leave. I wouldn't go to school because I would go to a demonstration. So we were always demonstrating outside an Israeli embassy or some embassy, really being voices, because it was about acting or speaking out. So one of my things I did in absolute urgency was making sure that every moment I was spending, and I am a Scorpio and I'm very passionate, and I did do that to the T, I took it literally. So I would spend a lot of my time actively speaking out and exposing, because there was a sense of urgency with this particular cult, is that we are in sin until we have fulfilled our mission. So every day you are in sin.
Wow.
That's a lot.
That is, and that also imbibes a really strong sense of purpose, which we also find when people are sucked into cults and high demand groups. They suddenly have a really strong, powerful sense of purpose. And so this idea that you're expressing, this, we're in sin until we do this, that's right on par with many Christian cults as well. And so they're absolutely driven to try and win converts.
But just imagine, like as I'm saying all of this, poor humans that have had to constantly sit in that bloody anxiety. I mean, I want to swear really, because I feel angry.
Yes.
Having that drummed in you that you can't even breathe and rest in your own skin because you have this running unconscious belief that you are going to be punished. It's so deep. Oh my God, it's making me feel emotional, because I feel that I haven't even touched upon my recovery. I mean, I'm going to take as much time as I can. And I'm hearing myself, and it just makes me realize how much compassion, how much compassion. Oh my God. I just feel so emotional right now. Excuse me.
That's all right. It's very understandable. And you were just a sweet, innocent child with much love to give and wanting to please others, to please your mother and please the leaders of the group and not be a disappointment. And of course, to please the God that they told you about, who apparently was very wrathful and vengeful and dangerous. I remember in a previous conversation you and I had, you were mentioning that there were different punishments, even for different sins, different levels of punishment. Can you talk a little bit about that? I think that would be very eye-opening.
Yeah, I mean, God, to do that. Yeah. I mean, that was something that I really learned from an early age, was that to instill fear was to be able to get people to, do things for the cult. And, there was a massive agenda there. And I learned from a young age that the fear and the talking of the punishments would really kind of get the attention of the audience, So I used to do a lot of research around scholars that spoke about in depth what happens to you when you die, the punishments of the grave, and all the kind of levels of hell. I mean,
so where were they getting this from?
So I did a lot of studying about Imam Ghazali. He was quite a famous scholar, and he had books and books and books. And I would go. I'm again. I don't know why I'm using Scorpio, but I don't know why I was so attracted to the death part. I think it's because of the transformation that I do now in my work, and knowing that part is kind of is part of the pattern and the synchronicity of it all. But I remember, I think it was really good for me to read it. So it kind of instilled a lot of fear in me. And then I would openly speak about it all the time. And it was, missing a prayer in the morning at 4 a.m. I was the one that woke everybody up, the 11-year-old. And I made sure I stood outside their door until they prayed.
Wow.
And I would not want to be my sister.
Because what would happen if you missed a 4 a.m. prayer?
Oh, I knew. Well, I knew all the intricate punishment. So, I didn't want that responsible on them. And I didn't want to feel responsible for it, because not only are you going to be punished, you're responsible for anybody else that's not. It's just really gets you in every single way. And I took that upon myself. So I would wake everybody up and keep going back and knocking and then I'd pray and make sure everybody prayed. So
wow. It's so you militant. Stepped into the parenting role there, or the spiritual, like you were responsible for everybody.
I really desperately wanted to be safe. It come from a place of safety. And yeah, I mean, I don't know even if it was coming, it wasn't coming from a kind place.
Right.
I don't remember it being kind, because I remember those. Yeah. There was no love in any of the teaching. It was just really fear. Rigid. And this is how it's got to be. This life is not for any form of pleasure. I mean, that's quite common theme, right?
Wow.
No joy. Yeah. No, it's just a stop. It's a place to get all your good deeds in. So I took that very literally, being so young, and just made sure I wanted to get through it as quickly as possible.
Wow.
And I tell you something, Janice, this was a turning point for me when I grew older. I got married very young. I was engaged at 14, and then I was married, and there's a whole story with that. But as I had my second child, I was I had my own suppression of my sexuality as well. So there was so much going on for me growing into a young adult. And I was speaking with my husband at the time, and I questioned, I said, so if you get like 40 virgins when you die and go to heaven, because I'd never really touched upon heaven. It was all about hell.
Wow.
I said, well, what am I going to get? And he said, well, you're going to get me. And I thought, are you... Mind my French. Are you telling me that I'm doing all of this? You're going to get 30 virgin women and I get you. I thought, the penny dropped. I thought, I've been duped here. I've been sold a dream here. I started to question, like, are you kidding me? Like, are you telling me that you're going to take my afterlife and you're even going to control that? So, it started to grind on me that you're even gonna take all of this to the next level where I'll go to heaven and I don't even have any choices there.
Wow.
Yeah.
So it sounds like very, very fear-based, and so women are either born into it or converted into it out of a sense of fear. And then they don't even have the pleasure of looking forward to a joyous afterlife, because they just get to keep being a slave in the next, oh boy.
I know. I was like, I think I might have to go join that hell that everybody's talking about.
Sounds like a lot more fun. Now, so you were engaged at 14, and that was to another cult member. Was he significantly older, close to your age? Did you know the person?
Well, I knew that it was, sadly, all the women were kind of prepped, and it was like whoever was part of the cult, the women were candidates. And I was young, and I had my lovely green eyes. And, I was being offered a lot. And I thought some of the people that were coming, I was like, oh my God, no. So I knew that I had to figure that out quickly, because I may have got married to, because they come with a lot of offers.
I see. Okay.
So there was
Offers
a
to
lot
your
of,
mother?
to my stepfather at the time.
Oh, your stepfather.
And
Okay.
I felt really, really awful, because sometimes I'd say yes, and then I'd be like, oh no. So then I realized I'm going to have to find somebody that maybe somebody that wouldn't come from a culture that I, didn't agree with, maybe a little bit of a lighter version. So I kind of was a little bit calculated myself as the years went on. So I must have, like 12, 13, 14, I knew, well, I'm prepping to be married.
Yes. So smart girl. You recognize what was going on.
Saw somebody in the peripherals, and actually he did come. So I didn't do anything about it.
Right.
So I obviously had good I was quite a good charmer at that age, even without doing anything. Actually, I don't know how that happened. Actually, and yeah, so he came and asked for my hand in marriage, and then. Yeah, we were engaged, which means that I couldn't communicate or anything, but I was his.
Wow. For how long? Like you were at 14. And so then at 16, you could actually be married.
Yeah.
Wow. And was he kind of a lighter version of the cult?
He joined later. He was from Turkey. I knew that the tradition wasn't as, I don't know, I just felt like I couldn't be with anybody that was religious and then traditional. It was just, I don't know. So yeah, he joined a little bit later, but yeah, he was then quite invested throughout the time, and very, very, very invested actually. So getting married to somebody I don't know how it works in other religions, but through this, it was all your rights go to your husband. So you need to have a general permission or specific permission to leave the house, answer the call, what you wear, how you speak.
Oh, everything. My goodness. And this is in the United Kingdom.
This is in the United Kingdom.
Wow.
So going to the shops, I couldn't go to certain shops, couldn't wear certain clothes, even though I've got the whole, couldn't wear trainers. So they take the control over in everything.
Wow.
Yeah. And you have to give, I mean, it's actually common knowledge that that's how it is.
Mm-hmm.
You can't even question that.
Wow. And your mom was okay with it all because she had been sucked in by the cult.
Yeah. And maybe she didn't know as much in our relationship. I don't think she wanted to get involved. And plus she was growing up, all of her kids, and very disassociated.
Okay.
But I think it was just whatever the clergy says, you listen to. And he dictates all the rulings. And yeah, it was very common knowledge.
Was there fear also so there's fear of hell in the afterlife. Was there fear of physical abuse in this life? Like you mentioned, there were people to check if you didn't want one strand of hair poking out from under your head covering. And I mean, certainly we're aware of the horrifying things going on in Iran right now. And so were the kind of morality police to that extent within your group?
What? So physically?
Yeah.
No.
Good. No. But it certainly worked mentally.
There would be mentally. So when I was young, word got out through my best friend to my mum that I was interested in women. Then that was taken to everybody. So I had to have shaming. So on a certain day, I was told to think about the action and burn in hell. And they would ask me all the time, how many times have you thought about it? So they completely annihilated and controlled my inner world, even with desires. So I would practice that. And that is something that I can't even begin to try and recover from. It's absolutely so difficult.
I'm so sorry that was done to you. You definitely did not deserve that. Nobody deserves that.
Yeah.
And so were you a teenager at that point? Was
Yes,
that
I was a
before you
teenager.
married? Okay. Wow. Goodness me. So then obviously that part of you was shut down for a time, at least for the duration of your remainder in the cult. And then you
Yes.
got engaged and you got married at 16. Did children come along shortly after that?
Yes, straight after.
And then it was after your second child when you had this pivotal conversation with your husband where you found out, oh, that actually is not sounding very good to me.
Yeah.
So what happened then? Did you talk to your mom about it or talk to anybody else?
So
Or?
through that period, I kind of lost contact with my mum because my mum had then left the cult a few years prior and started her own recovery, but in a very different way. So she realized, I think it was when she went and visited, she did a pilgrimage in Saudi Arabia and met the Muslims and realized, hold on a minute, where's the spirituality in anything? So when she came back, she had some different ideas, and my husband found out about those ideas. So I wasn't really allowed to see her. Wasn't really. He didn't want me to be influenced in any way.
What were your thoughts on that?
Well, I didn't know. I didn't really judge it because maybe a part of me was very curious about it because I noticed that my mum did it with some confidence. So whatever was happening, so she almost kind of started a wave there, but then we couldn't hang out with her. She was the talk of the town and everything.
Oh dear.
So I didn't really have I wasn't close to her through that time. So I was kind of questioning, but I was then losing my loyalty. But then I was realizing that I'm not a hypocrite. Like when I do things, I have to do it wholeheartedly. And of course, my desire to be with a woman had just gotten even stronger. And I'd never really interacted with, a non-Muslim, let alone somebody that, What would I even say? I don't know why I've stopped myself. A lesbian woman. And it just slowly kind of happened where my husband was invested in work at the time. So I had a little bit more space and time on my own.
Right. And how old were your kids?
They were 1.5 and 3.
And did you have a daughter and a son, or how? Okay. So what were your thoughts then for your daughter? Were you seeing your situation as repressive at that time, or?
So, sorry, Janice, what was that question?
Oh, yeah, no problem.
At the time, though, I can hear buzzing, and I just was making sure that it's all right.
I think it was my furnace. Sorry about that. It's cold in Canada. Yes, my question was, what were your thoughts as you had a daughter and you'd be bringing up your daughter within the confines of the cult? At that point, were you questioning the repression that was going on?
I think that we kind of came away from that, from some of the restrictions. I think my husband was questioning some things too at the time. But maybe he was. I'm not sure what I thought. I think that it was all I ever knew. So I didn't really think, is this going to be repressing for the children? At that time, it was only because it was my world. I didn't know the difference between other children being brought up.
Okay.
So I was only mixed with people from the cult that had children, and we all kind of brought our children up in the same way. I did question some things, like where some of the parents would question what the children are learning about Nelson Mandela, because there was this nursery that all the kids would go to. And they said that it's not okay to learn about history because it's not linked to Islam. And, I
Wow.
started to question things like this. I don't know if I want my children to be, I want them to have an education. So, um, yeah, so I think there was, I guess from a perspective of being liberal with the children, I wanted them to see a little bit more. So the cult kind of refined or restricted even learning on what to learn.
Right.
I started to question that.
Right. And we know that's a hallmark of cults as well, that they want to control what information you have access to. And so that sounds right on target for being in a cult. And then your mom was ostensibly shunned from the community.
Oh, yes.
So then how long after your mom left till you decided, this isn't for me, I can't stay here anymore?
Maybe a year. I'm not sure exactly around timing, but it was as soon as I did, then my sister. So it was the women that took the plunge.
Wow.
And my sister was very young at the time. She was about 17. So we were like the used as examples. Do you want to be the Fatimas and Zorahs of the world? And everybody would be like, oh, they're just they're apostates now. And the mother and then the daughter's a lesbian, So we were used as examples to strengthen, because they obviously did their job wrong.
Wow. So then can you tell us a little bit how you actually came to leave? Some of these thoughts were percolating in your mind. You knew you wanted your kids to receive an education. You knew you didn't fancy the idea of an afterlife where you were a slave for your husband forever. And so something happened at some point to make you say, no, I'm not staying. I'm not raising my kids like this anymore.
I felt so suffocated. And that's what it was. And I never used to complain. I used to give it all up to God. And I started to feel so suffocated, and I was becoming a young woman, and I wanted to, I just wanted to flip and experience some form of something. I wanted to be noticed. I wanted to be able to, I was so hidden at home. It's depressed isn't even the word. Like, absolutely no connection to anything.
Wow.
And I felt suffocated, and I started to become beyond miserable. So I started to retaliate with my husband, and he noticed, not got her under manners anymore, because I would be annoyed that I couldn't wear a long dress instead of, something a little bit more Western, and kind of copied the style of it. And when I realized that, I just don't want to do this anymore. So I started to rebel slowly, and I started to resent, and I started to not enjoy, and I started to feel quite disassociated to it all. And I think it was such a subtle, slow unplugging. And I knew that I'm not somebody that can be fake. So I stopped resonating with the talks and the community, and I just disassociated. And then I felt like I do have a connection to something inside. There was that, and still is. So I felt like, well, now it doesn't even feel. Now this just feels like a drag. Now it's like, you just lose. I just lost passion. And I started to feel repressed. And I had never felt that before. I didn't question anything. I was like, bring on people asking me when it's 50 degrees and I'm sweating buckets. Yeah. Are you not hot in that?
Yeah.
And I would say, it's hotter in hell.
Oh my God.
I know, what the hell? Yeah, I loved it. I was so passionate about it. So I just didn't resonate.
And so how old about were you and your kids at that time when you were just pulling away?
23.
Yeah. So pretty young, a young adult, but a mother Yes. Yes. And so then what happened? Your husband sees that he can no longer control you the way that he was able to control you before. And
Yeah, I
do you
mean,
at some point say, I'm done, I'm leaving, you can come with me or not? Or,
no, no, no. I think I just kind of one day I popped and I said, this is how I feel. I don't want to wear the scarf. And also, by the way, I like women. I just thought while I'm here,
by the way,
by the way, stick it all in. And then I think he was, well, I don't know. He went through a whole load himself.
Mhm.
Um, and he went out and then he didn't come back. And I think in that space, I plucked the courage to leave, because I knew that it would be, well, I don't think I thought I'd be left for dead. I didn't think I'd have to restart. I thought, this is our family, we'll figure it out, but it wasn't that way. And then I realized that if I wasn't going to comply to him, and how are we going to do this, I would still be stuck. So I had to just go into the unknown and start everything from scratch. And I think if you ask me any questions around them, I was completely disassociated.
Mhm.
Like, I don't remember. I just remember saying to the kids when I realized that everything was gone, I had nothing, and all the money, nothing, no money, nothing. And I said to the kids, I'm free. And I started to run up and down and up and down. And they were thinking, what the hell are you saying? Like,
Oh
we
my
look like our house has been burgled. And I was like, I'm free. I'm free. And I couldn't stop shouting. I couldn't stop crying.
Oh, that's my
I
favorite
did
part of
not
the movie.
care. I did not flipping care about the
Beautiful.
car or money or
Oh.
I had nothing. And I was like, you don't understand. Like, this is like winning the lottery. I
Yes.
can breathe. I can just, oh my God.
Oh.
And I think that exhilaration led me through all of the torment of, rebuilding, restarting, learning
Mhm.
how to be in the world. And that whole journey was run on this exhilaration of freedom.
Yes.
Carried me.
Yes. So did you and the children move out of that space then? Like, did he come back and you had to go and find another place?
We had to keep moving and go into the system. And
Okay.
you
Yeah.
know
Were you able to reconnect with your mom?
obviously everything was the what was really difficult, of course, like being in poverty and then like having a car to take the kids to school. Like we had to just learn. I had to make it fun. We got on a bus and 2 trains in the freezing cold. I mean, I was so angry. And everybody would say, why did you not save money? Why did you not plan this? Because he had money. And I was like, do you really think that I'm going to sit there? Like, I took an opportunity and I ran with it,
Mhm, mhm. Yeah, victim blaming at its finest, for sure. That's like asking, why did you stay so long? Now, the important thing is you were free. You were making strides to free yourself and free your children.
Yeah.
Were you able to connect with your mom then?
Yes, she was. For the first time, she just looked at me and said, you have to do this. And I told her, how I feel about women. And she said, okay. And that was it.
Nice.
There was no questions. There was no questions in my family. It was like, this is how it's going to be now. And I just kept, coming out. And I think that was so much more of part of the story that I remember. Didn't obviously have time to think about all the other stuff, right? Like the guilt and the, how I felt about God or religion.
So you've had to work through those things subsequently?
Yeah, of course.
And I have a question about your sister, because you mentioned your sister. So did she know, were you sharing with her as these concerns and questions were coming up, or did you just phone her and say, I've just told him that I don't believe anymore? I mean, how did that work? Because you said she kind of followed.
Oh no, I just went around the house and she said, where's your scarf? And then she just took hers off. She's like, I don't even want to do this. They're not as passionate as me. She was at school and everything, and she couldn't. I don't think it resonated with her at all. I mean, she's now very corporate and you know, took another road than me, and she wasn't as connected to it. But of course, she was completely in it.
Yes.
So no, we had no conversation. We just went out to the shops without our scarf on for the first time and felt.
What was that like?
Well, firstly, I thought all these people would be looking at me. Nobody cared. You know, it's like we went to the shopping centre, and I was like, oh, this is normal. But for a long time, I felt like I'd forgotten, like I'd gone out without my underwear on or something. Right. It felt very strange. You know, very, very strange. Yeah. But it was absolutely completely freeing. It was just like, wow. I mean, I didn't know what it felt like to look like everybody else outside.
Yes, just to kind of feel normal.
I didn't get spoken to like I was deaf or dumb. You know, to be spoken to behind the hijab is awful as a woman. It's absolutely awful. It's you're just spoken to like you're a piece of shit. And it was so normal for me for people to respond to me like they'd shout like I'm deaf, and they'd overly explain, or, you know, racist abuse, or, you know, it was just, I was so familiar with being, you know, it kind of strengthens you a little bit. Well, it makes you kind of strong in your identity, because people are not going to like you when you're wearing a hijab. I mean, never got anybody that was kind.
It really does create a barrier of sorts. And yes, I think that it does evoke, unfortunately, lots of racism and misunderstanding, lots of judgment. Yes, absolutely. And so then your kids, you would have moved them to a public school, or were they school age?
Well, they were school age, and we had found a nice school for them. So they continued. And they... I don't know how, but, you know, I mean, when they were with their dad, of course, you know, they had a lot of the Islam plugged in them. So the
co-parenting.
The co-parenting, yeah. I mean, they did end up going, they went to a public school.
How challenging. How challenging to do the co-parenting when one parent remains entrenched in the religious ideology or the cult.
Oh, yeah. So he married somebody that was like that. So they both kind of indoctrinate the children in their own way. So they were quite split growing up and felt a lot of guilt when they were at mine, and lots of judgments. And that went on until, so it was like, it's never over, is it? The recovery. And then I think they got into teenage years, and they started to sway into their own truth. And I just had to take the humiliation and the shaming, because of course I felt guilty, and I had made that choice, and it was came with a risk every day. You know, I took the risk of leaving the truth and that for this. So, you know, I took on, you know, all of the bullying from the kids and the parent and the dad, and all of the you know, all of the bad mouthing. I just took it. I took it because I thought, well, I deserve that, because I took this leap of faith. But it was, you know, it wasn't until like as they grew older and I started to really go into recovery myself that I started to learn to forgive myself, and started to learn, which I still am, to become an empowered woman, which is going to be a long journey, but it's the journey I'm looking forward to taking.
Yes, there's a quote from a poem, and I think it speaks so beautifully to what you're talking about. And it says, "Let it be known that I did not fall from grace. I leaped to freedom." And I feel like that is so true in your
I have to write that down.
Yes, yes. I'll try and find the poem and include it in the show notes. And so, how long ago was this? How long have you been out of the cult?
Oh God, I'm 40 now, so what's the maths there? Maybe 17 years.
Very nice. And so the kids are grown now. Are you able to maintain a relationship with the kids?
Do
With
I
your
maintain a
children?
relationship?
Yes. With
Oh
your
yeah, they live
children.
with me.
Yay!
Oh yeah, they're my
Wonderful.
babies. We like laugh about it. If we speak about anything religious, they're like, "What's that mean, Mum?" I'm like,
Wow.
you know, I don't understand it. Like I'm speaking another language.
Wow.
They loved it. When they hear about it, they're Layla, my daughter especially, she just can't get her head around it. She's like, that was like another life.
Right.
But they obviously had their own, journey with what it was. But the extreme part of it, they find really hard to get their head around.
And so, what would you say was the hardest part for you in building your new life away from the cult? What was the most challenging aspect?
I mean, I have no flipping identity now. I've got to start from scratch. I've not been encouraged to school. I felt like nothing, and just this passionate person with all this information that nobody cared about. Like, and I was a very studious person, so I knew everything. But where the hell is it going to go? Like, what do I do with all this knowledge now? And who am I in the world now? Just some really anxious person that's trying to in survival, and I just now trying to find an identity of who I am, because I knew that there was something underneath all of it, and I had to find my way. And I realized, what I found is that if I was around people and they say, "Oh, what do you do?" I felt embarrassed for saying that I'm a mum, and I didn't find that in the cult. To be a woman, I found that there was some honor there.
Right.
Even though, in a funny way, even though you're oppressed, it's like who you are, that's the highest honor. And now all of a sudden I'm apologizing for who I am, and realized, oh, okay, now I need to build on being something so I'm visible and I'm liked. So it was really difficult. And I compared myself to everybody, like, well, how comes I'm not? And I forgot about my past. I forgot that I just started to then get on the ladder of who am I and what do I do? And everybody was going ahead, and I was struggling with my mental health and fitting in, and, everything's like being visible is completely not okay. So now I'm trying to be visible in a world that I've been told is not the right world. And, I've only just become visible now. I've only just felt safe. It's all my recovery. I've only just found a place.
Yes.
And it feels like a noble place to be. And I didn't realize, all this baggage has stopped me. I just thought, well, what's wrong with me? Like, how comes everybody's just moving through their lives? And you don't look back, do you? You don't see that, maybe you lived a very different life to everybody else.
Exactly. Wow. And you and I have a mutual friend in Dr. Marlene Winnell, and she has written a very important book called Leaving the Fold. And it's very helpful for people like you and I who've come out of very rigid, fundamentalist, authoritarian religious backgrounds and high control groups and cults. And so Leaving the Fold is a book that I recommend to people when I'm speaking with them about religious trauma. Is there a book or resource that you recommend to people, or anything else that you've found really helpful?
God, well, I've read the book, by the way, and worked with Marlene, and she's wonderful.
She
really,
is
really wonderful.
Yeah.
But what would I recommend? God,
Have you been able to connect with others on a similar journey?
No, this is my first time actually.
Wow.
And
Wow.
it's something that I'm really looking forward to. The next
Yes.
part of my chapter and adventure is to now meet like-minded people that have been through this. I've not really come across other people, and it's going to be really nice for my recovery to be able to connect to others.
Yes.
Also,
Yes. Oh boy, you are such a delight. You really are. You are just such a passionate, authentic, bubbly human. I wish you lived closer. I would love to go out for coffee.
I totally would come to all the groups and everything.
Wow. What a treat. Well, thank you for spending time with us today and telling us some of your story. And please give us the name of your website again.
It's www.zorahkhan.com.
Okay, and we'll be including that in the show notes. And if you think of anything else once we're done recording that you'd like me to include by way of resources or places where people can contact you, please let me know and I'll slip those right in the notes. And thank you everyone for watching and listening to the Divorcing Religion podcast. And you can reach me through my website, www.divorcing-religion.com. I work with clients one-on-one for religious recovery, and I lead the Divorcing Religion workshop online. Thanks everyone. Take care and we'll see you again soon.